When you think of Pokemon cards, you probably picture playgrounds and 90s nostalgia. You probably don't think about violent felonies and complex money laundering scams. But we're living in a strange timeline. And today we're talking about the absolute most bizarre things that people have done for Pokemon cards. There's a specific type of madness that happens when internet hype collides with the criminal justice system. We're going to be deep diving into the most disturbing and unhinged stories about Pokemon cards right now. Today, we're looking into the Pokemon to prison pipeline. We're going to talk about some real world cases that will make you look at those shiny packs differently. Let's get spooky. Hey, spooky people. It's your best friend, Ken. The disturbing stream of armed robberies that shook up the Gage Park neighborhood in Chicago earlier this spring had a man at the center of the crime named Anthony Garcia. Garcia was a resident of Chicago's Southwest Side. Before his name was released to the public, the Chicago Police Department had put out a community alert with a physical description of the suspect that fits Garcia. He was described as a Hispanic male standing somewhere between 5'6" and 5'10" and weighing around 200 pounds. Victims noted that he had a beard, wore framed glasses, and consistently dressed in dark-colored clothing during the commission of the robberies. What made Garcia stand out was the sheer brazenness of his methods. He wasn't breaking into stores in the middle of the night. He was communicating with his targets, arranging to meet them face-to-face, and looking them dead in the eye before pulling a weapon. According to the Chicago Police Department, there were 5 victims in total across the span of the crime spree. All 5 of them are young men, ranging in age between 19 and 29. These are guys who were on the internet trying to sell their property. They were trying to sell Pokemon cards. They were just regular guys who created some listings online, negotiated a price, and agreed to meet up with the buyer. None of them had any reason to suspect that the person on the other end of the screen was plotting an armed robbery. These young men walked into what they believed was a normal transaction. They showed up with their cards in hand, expecting to shake hands, swap the goods for cash, and go on about their day. Instead, they were ambushed. And the psychological toll of being lured into a confined space and having a gun pointed at you is pretty big. For those 5 men, what was supposed to be a local sale turned into a fight or flight scenario where their lives were suddenly on the line. So how did Garcia pull this off? Well, he stuck to his own playbook for every single hit. First, Garcia went on Facebook Marketplace. It's always Facebook, right? He would scour the platform for young men selling Pokemon cards in the Chicago area. Once he found a target, he would message them, posing as an eager buyer. He would have, your typical back and forth that you'd expect when buying something off the internet. He'd ask about the condition of the cards. He would talk about the purchase price. And finally, they would set up a time and place to meet. And this is where the trap was set. Garcia didn't agree to meet his victims in your typical busy, well-lit public spaces, and he didn't want to meet them at coffee shops. Instead, he told the sellers to come to a building lobbies located off of South Kedzie Street in the Gage Park neighborhood of Chicago. And the choice was important. A building lobby has a very specific tactical advantage for a robber. First of all, it's accessible from the street, but it separates the victim from the eyes of the passing traffic and the pedestrians. And it's a confined space. When a victim walks into the lobby, their exit routes are limited. They're boxed in. Garcia would wait for the victim to arrive. The seller would walk into the lobby expecting to find the guy they'd been talking to on Facebook. And Garcia would approach them. Instead of pulling out his wallet to hand over cash, he would pull out a handgun. He would demand the cards, take the cards by force, and then immediately flee the scene on foot. He didn't have a getaway car. He simply ran out of the lobby and disappeared into the surrounding neighborhood. The crime spree kicked off on Tuesday, March 17th. I guess you could call this his trial run. Garcia messaged his first victim on Facebook Marketplace, lured the man to a lobby on South Kedzie Street, and committed the robbery. He pulled the gun, took the cards, and vanished on foot. After the robbery, things went quiet. For 10 days, who knows what Garcia was doing? Perhaps he was laying low to see if the police were onto him, or maybe he was just sitting in the glow of his lovely Pokemon cards. 10 days later, on Friday, March 27th, Garcia struck again. He pulled off the same scheme. He found another seller online, sent them messages, arranged the meetup on South Kedzie, and pulled the gun. The second victim was another man in his 20s. At this point, Garcia had successfully committed 2 armed robberies and had gotten away clean. And this seems to embolden him, so he started doing more crimes. The next day, on Sunday, March 28th, Garcia was back at it. He didn't even wait 24 hours before setting up his next victim. By hitting these victims on consecutive days, Garcia was taking some risks. He was operating in the same 2-block area, using the same online platform, and, well, he looked the same, but it wasn't done yet. On Sunday, March 29th, his audacity reached new levels. He didn't just commit one armed robbery, he committed 2. And Garcia managed to coordinate 2 separate meetups on the same day. He lured a 4th victim into the Kedzie lobbies, pulled his weapon, took the cards. Then he did it to a 5th victim just hours later. It's got to be hard to manage multiple armed robberies in a single day, keeping your stories straight, going back and forth on Facebook, returning messages, and, keeping your head cool while doing this. By the end of the weekend, Garcia had carried out 5 armed robberies for Pokemon cards in the span of just under 2 weeks. However, during this time, the Chicago Police Department were connecting the dots. When you have a suspect operating in a certain area with that physical description, with the same mode of operation, it doesn't take long for the police to realize who they're dealing with. The Chicago Police Department's citywide robbery task force took over the investigation. They began compiling reports from the robberies. They analyzed the digital footprints left on Facebook Marketplace, interviewed the 5 victims, and canvassed the Gage Park area for surveillance footage and witnesses. And they closed in on Garcia very quickly. Just 2 days after his double robbery, Tuesday, March 31st, the citywide robbery task force located him, just a few blocks east of where the robberies took place. Once Garcia was arrested, the Cook County State's attorney reviewed the evidence gathered by the robbery task force. The victim statements, the digital evidence from Facebook, and the physical descriptions of the robber all pointed towards Garcia. So the hammer came down hard. Anthony Garcia was slapped with 5 separate felony counts of armed robbery. In Illinois, an armed robbery is a Class X felony, which is the most severe classifications of a crime in Illinois, and it carries heavy mandatory minimum prison sentences. After his arrest, Garcia was held over for his initial court appearance. On the afternoon of Thursday, April 2nd, he appeared before a Cook County judge for a detention hearing. And given the violent nature of his crimes, the use of a firearm, and the fact that he was accused of committing 5 separate felonies in a 12-day window, prosecutors argued that he posed a significant threat to the community, so he was denied bond. As of today, Anthony Garcia's case is winding its way through the Cook County criminal justice system. He's currently waiting trial on all 5 Class X felonies. Because the arrest just happened, the case is still in its relatively early stages. His attorneys and the state prosecutors will be moving through the discovery phase, exchanging evidence, and preparing for eventual trial. There's been no announcement of any plea deal being offered or accepted at this time, and unless a plea agreement is reached behind closed doors in the coming months, Garcia is going to face a jury trial. If he's convicted of all 5 counts of armed robbery, the 23-year-old Garcia is very likely spending decades, if not the rest of his life, in prison. It's a heavy reality for a guy who decided to use Facebook to get Pokemon cards illegally. Have you ever wanted something so badly that you'd risk catching a felony charge just to be first in line? We've all heard wild stories about people camping out on sidewalks for days in the freezing cold to get their hands on the newest PlayStation or some shoes or front row concert tickets. But in April 2026, one guy in Pasadena, California, took that dedication to a wild new level. He decided that camping outside of Best Buy was for beginners. Instead, he decided to camp inside the store. The man at the center of this surreal overnight camp retreat is 45-year-old Patrick Keyes. Now, when you picture a burglar sneaking around a massive electronics retailer at midnight, you probably think of a guy that's decked out in tactical gear with earpieces and duffel bags. But that definitely wasn't this guy's vibe. When security finally caught him on their surveillance feeds, Keyes was described as simply a white man in his 40s wearing a dark blue hoodie and light-colored khakis. He didn't have a getaway driver waiting in the alley. He didn't have a bag full of lock-picking tools. He was just a solo guy who saw the unique opportunity to completely bypass the massive crowd that was gathering outside the store. He was after a highly anticipated restock of Pokemon cards, which was the sole reason a massive crowd of collectors was outside of the store. The way he went about this crime was pretty funny based on how bold and simple his plan was. On the evening of April 28th, 2026, this Best Buy in Pasadena was preparing to close. Outside the front doors, a long line of dedicated Pokemon card collectors were already forming. These people were putting out lawn chairs, bringing blankets, and getting ready to spend the entire night on the concrete just to secure the newest Pokemon cards dropping the next morning. Instead of joining the freezing crowd on the sidewalk, Keyes took a different approach. He went into the Best Buy before closing time, blended in as a normal customer, and just didn't leave. When police investigated the scene, they realized there was no signs of forced entry. Keys didn't smash a glass window, and he didn't pick any locks to go inside. He just found a hiding spot while the store was still open. Maybe he was crouched behind the refrigerators in the warehouse section, or perhaps he locked himself in a bathroom stall and stood on the toilet. Whatever he did, he managed to stay dead silent while the employees did their nightly sweeps, turned off the lights, and locked the exterior doors from the outside. Keys had the massive dark Best Buy to himself. For hours, he was completely undetected. But, of course, he got caught. Around 1:14 in the morning, Keys got restless and started roaming the dark aisles. But unfortunately for him, big box retailers don't just have locked doors to keep their inventory safe. Security personnel monitor the store's live surveillance feeds from remote offside locations, and they noticed him moving on the cameras. They spotted this mysterious figure in a dark blue hoodie casually walking through the pitch black store. They realized there was an active intruder inside the locked building. Security flagged the feed and dispatched the Pasadena Police Department. Now, think about the poor Best Buy manager that got that frantic phone call at 1:30 in the morning. They had to drag themselves out of bed, drive down to the store in the middle of the night, unlock the front door so a team of police officers could sweep the store. Think about those Pokemon card collectors who've been waiting patiently outside for hours, waiting in a chair, chatting with other fans, and suddenly dozens of Pasadena police cars swarm the parking lot. Red and blue lights are flashing everywhere, and officers are surrounding the perimeter of the building. The peaceful overnight campout instantly turned to a chaotic crime scene, leaving the crowd confused as they watched heavily armed police lock down the store that they were waiting to shop at. When the police arrived at the store, they knew they had the suspect trapped inside. Instead of smashing the front glass door to gain entry, they quickly coordinated with the Best Buy employee who was called to the scene with the keys to the building. Once the doors were unlocked, officers stormed the dark aisles and quickly found Keys. There was no standoff. Keys was taken into police custody without any incident. Now, when the officers searched him, he didn't have any expensive laptops or tablets or bags of stolen merchandise with him. But you obviously can't secretly hang out inside a closed commercial business overnight. Patrick Keys was arrested on suspicion of burglary. And under California law, burglary isn't just about physically breaking a window or running out with stolen goods. Entering a commercial building with the explicit intent to commit theft is classified as a burglary. The fact that he didn't have any merchandise in his hands when the cops found him didn't clear him of the crime. The act of hiding and waiting was enough to trigger the suspicion of burglary charges. As of now, the case against Keys is working its way through the legal system. We'll see what happens in court, but either way, his bizarre attempt to beat the system ended it with him being escorted out in handcuffs, and I'm willing to bet he never got his Pokemon card. Now, when you think of organized retail theft and money laundering, you probably picture some sophisticated group of hackers with offshore bank accounts. You probably don't think about 99-cent packets of taco seasoning. Keith Wallis, who was 39 years old and from Palm Beach, Florida, thought that old El Paso was the key to a massive multi-county criminal enterprise. Keith was a guy living in Palm Beach who apparently saw a vulnerability in how big box retailers handle Pokemon cards at self-checkout lines. Wallis turned himself into a one-man organized retail theft ring, treating the entire state of Florida as his personal warehouse. You knew we were going to have a Florida man story, right? Between July 2025 and February 2026, Wallis executed one of the most bizarre yet somehow effective theft schemes that you will ever hear about. Wallis would walk into a Target store. He would go to the trading card aisle, load up on large, expensive boxes of Pokemon cards. Then he would walk over to the grocery section, grab an equal number of 99-cent taco seasoning packets. When he got to the self-register checkout, the hustle began. Wallis would cover the barcodes of the expensive trading card boxes with the taco seasoning packets. He would scan the seasoning, bag the cards, and walk out the front door, paying literally pennies on the dollar. But stealing the cards was only half the scheme. To complete the cycle and make money, Wallis had to wash the stolen good. He took all those stolen boxes back to his home and listed them on his eBay account. By selling the stolen goods to the unsuspecting buyers online, he was laundering the retail products into clean cash that he would deposit into his bank accounts. And he made nearly 40 grand from eBay sales through doing that. Wallis managed to hit 75 different Target stores with this scam, and he caused the direct financial loss of over $10,000 in inventory. But the everyday collectors who bought these things from him on eBay could possibly lose the merchandise that they bought because it's subject to seizure. It was the sheer volume of Wallis's operation that caught the attention of authorities. A joint task force led by the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, the Office of statewide prosecution, and several other county sheriffs finally tracked him down. On February 23rd, 2026, they got him. Florida Attorney General James Uthmeyer announced Wallis's arrest. Because of how he fenced the items online, Wallis was slapped with heavy felony charges. 2 counts of felony organized retail theft, 3 counts of felony dealing in stolen property, and 1 count of felony money laundering. As of this video, Wallis is currently in jail. Investigators are looking into whether he ran this scheme at Walmarts and Publix's also. If he's convicted of the felony charges, he faces a maximum sentence of up to 90 years in Florida prison. It really makes you take a step back and think about the concept of value, doesn't it? At the end of the day, these are literally just pieces of printed cardboard. They only have worth because we agree that they do. When that innocent 90s nostalgia trip suddenly morphs into these massive assets, that value becomes real. People stop seeing something for kids and start seeing cold hard cash. And that's when greed takes over and people start risking decades of their lives in prison. It's wild to see how quickly a harmless hobby mutates into a rap sheet. When you go from being just a collector to an armed robber or a fraudster, the courts don't care that you are trying to pull a holographic Pikachu. You aren't playing a game anymore. You're playing with Class X felonies and mandatory prison sentences. Make sure you subscribe to this channel, The Spooky Lawyer. Make sure that you like and share this video. If you'd like to support the channel, you could become a member of the channel. I appreciate you considering that. You can also support me by continuing to watch, share, like, hype, and leave comments on my videos. And I do appreciate you watching my videos. And please stay spooky.